Hi everyone, this is Rob Plevin from Needs Focused Teaching, and this workshop is called Zen Productivity for Teachers, How to Create More Time in Your Life. Now, I'm actually recording this in my office. I ran the workshop last night, the 2nd of August, for people who'd joined this program, and there were about 15 people online. The idea was to create a recording of the live workshop and have that recording for you as members of this program to watch at your leisure, those of you that couldn't make the live session. However, the recording didn't actually work. I didn't get any sound back whatsoever. My microphone must have been switched off or something. Or in the settings, it must have been switched off. So basically, I'm going to have to record it now again, rather than reschedule the whole thing and invite you in again. What I'm going to do is just go through this fairly briskly so that you've got all the information, and at a later date I will be running the live session again. I'm going to do it another 2 or 3 times, I think, and you will have access to every one of those additional sessions. So without further ado, I'm just going to go through this presentation as I did do live last night. There'll probably be a few changes. I can't do it word for word, but basically you're going to get the same information. So this program is about, as it says, creating more time in your life. It's about an hour and a half long, and I'm going to explain a number of really powerful productivity secrets or strategies which can make a real difference to your life. Some of them you'll know about, some of them you won't know about, but a lot of these are tools and methods used by business leaders and high performers in all areas. So I'm sure you're going to get something from them. I'll also explain at the end a special method that I used recently to get more done in 2 hours than I had done in the previous 2 days. And it shocked me so much when I did this. I was actually working at my father's house. I'll tell you the story later on. But it shocked me so much that it prompted me to write a Facebook post about it and to share it on my blog. And I got a lot of interaction about that. It created a lot of interest. So I thought, well, I'll put a program together because it helped me so much. And some of the things that I've learned over the years to cope with ADHD and lack of organization and planning in my own life, these things have helped me so much. I use them now in my own life. I thought, well, I'm going to share them, and you can use them too. So we're going to go through 3 main ways to save time and improve your productivity, and that is improving your organization, improving your efficiency, and improving your focus. Before I get into it though, I ran a survey prior to the workshop last night, and I invited everyone who was registered for Zen Productivity for Teachers to answer 2 main questions. There were 4 questions on there, or 5 questions, but the 2 main ones, I've pulled some of the answers out, nowhere near all of them, but I've taken a few out. The first question was, why do you feel the need to improve your productivity and time management? And I'll just zip through some of the answers I got because I think they're quite relevant, really. In the past 3.5 years, I've been teaching. I've seen my relationships, my mental health suffer because all my time and energy has gone into teaching. It's a summer break for teachers, but I keep thinking about September. It makes me feel guilty if a day goes by without me having done something productive. I spent too much time in the classroom and doing work at home last year. I want a better way to complete what needs to be done so I can be with my family in the evenings and weekends and not spend it all working. I have always tended to struggle to keep on top of marking, and I'm very good at procrastinating. Having become seriously ill this year, I feel I need to try and achieve a better work-life balance and reduce my stress levels. I'm usually overwhelmed, often off pace in curriculum because dealing with so many behavior and admin issues. I can't keep up with grading, report cards, process. It's a nightmare. I'm working way too many hours and often feel frustrated and sometimes in tears. I'm exhausted. I end up procrastinating and putting things off because I'm so fed up and drained from the demands on my time. So there were reasons why people wanted to do this. What's getting you down? Why do you feel that you really must start making some changes? And I think they were fairly common to most people. Most people, some actually had written long essays about how bad the situation was. And I get that, I understand it. Teachers are under an awful lot of pressure. And it's a very busy world we live in. So that was the first question. The second one was, what is your biggest problem with regard to productivity and time management? And these, again, were just some of the answers. I get distracted. I also procrastinate necessary tasks that I hate doing. Having to do administrative tasks. Senior management piling on additional duties on top of my already full plate. I'm disorganized and can't cope with the rate of change. I'm stressed by the amount of information I have to deal with. Purely the workload, writing plans, assessments, admin, dealings with parents, reports, demands from senior staff, and all while having to deal with the students and their behaviour. Kids' behaviour, constantly distracting everything, keeping up with procedures and grading, class size, admin, school demands, my ADD, ADHD, and humanness, including that I care too much. Okay. A lot of common issues across the board. I picked out answers there that appeared several times from different people. So there were relatively few problems, but they were common to everyone. Workload, being disorganized, procrastinating, the demands placed on us and causing stress. And often because of our makeup, the way we're acting, the way we're behaving, because of our physiological, mental, psychological makeup that makes us behave in that way. So the plan for today is to address those issues. Obviously, I'm going to give you techniques and strategies across those three main areas: organization, efficiency, and focus. So we're going to look at something called the declutter machine. Some of you may have come across this already because it's already a version of it is available as a download on our website. I'm going to show you how to improve your to-do lists so that they actually get done. There's a big problem with to-do lists, and that is that they don't actually get finished most of the time. So we're going to look at several ways of improving them. I'm going to show you how to save countless hours with something called batching and outsourcing. And then I'm going to introduce you to the technique that made itself I can't find the word. My word's gone. What word am I looking for here? I'm tempted to say I discovered, but I know I haven't discovered this because it's been around a long time. But it made itself apparent to me when I was working on my dad's house recently, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And as I say, I got more done in 2 hours than I'd done in the previous 2 days. And it's purely down to this focusing method. So I'm going to introduce you to that. And I say there, triple your productivity. I think it can do even far better than that. You can literally be zipping through tasks, blazing through things that you normally find quite difficult or unsavory, and you can actually turn unenjoyable tasks into a bit of a fun game. It's incredibly effective. And then at the end, there's also 4 little magic words to keep you on task and help you with that focus method. Now, a hidden benefit to all this, as well as addressing all these issues that you've got here, is that you're going to become a different person. I'll explain why in a moment. But just one of the things you might find happening is that you become more punctual, because when you start to address the way you behave in relation to time management and the way you change your productivity, and one of the natural improvements is going to be punctuality. And that in itself is incredibly powerful, because when you are punctual, it gives you the right to demand respect from others. And having and commanding respect from others is a huge advantage in school, as you well know. We can get trampled on, we can get walked on and taken advantage of. And this is a great way of countering that. Interestingly, when I run workshops and seminars for teachers live in venues or in schools, I can guarantee that at least 20%, if not 30%, of attendees in those workshops are going to be late after every break. So they're going to come walking in, sometimes 10, even 15 minutes late, many of them just a couple of minutes late, but some of the, really taking the mick. And yet these are the very people who complain about students not being well behaved, students not bringing equipment to class, students being late in the morning. And often the case is that our own behavior is reflected back at us. So if we've got an issue with, let's say, being untidy, then we often see around us a very untidy world. If we've got an issue with finding people irritating and getting irritated, it's likely that we'll find a lot of opportunities to be irritated. The world tends to reflect back at us what we're giving out. And I keep coming back to a saying that I read in a book called Zen and the Art of Happiness by Chris Prentice. It just keeps coming up in my life all the time. I just think it's so powerful. Zen and the Art of Happiness by Chris Prentice. I first read this when I was in hospital. I was struggling with PTSD and just been in a fairly almost fatal accident with my wife. And along with my wife, I should say. It wasn't an incident in which we had an accident together. Anyway, the saying is this: how you do anything is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. And it is so true. We are defined by our habits. And this course, I believe, any course, excuse me, any course in self-development or improvement that is actually implemented has the potential to change not just the area of your life that you're focusing on, but every area of your life. If you act on it and you improve an area of your life, it's going to affect every area of your life. Let me give you an example. If you just picture for a moment a teacher who is always on time. So that's the only thing you need to know about them right now. They're always on time. They're always punctual. And we'll call that teacher A. And then if you compare that with a teacher who is often late, they're either late for work, or they're late for the lesson, or they're late for a meeting, or they're late when they've said they're going to call. Okay, they're not always late, but often late. We'll call that teacher B. Now, just that one fact, that one is punctual and one is tardy, is enough to tell you all sorts of other things about those two people. For example, which one of them would you expect to have a tidy, organized desk? A or B? Clearly it's A. Which one would you then expect to have a tidy classroom with routines in place and all the resources and materials in place for the students? A or B? Obviously it's going to be A. And then with those pieces of information, which one would you expect to have perhaps a chaotic start to their lessons because they can't find pens and other resources for the students, or because they haven't put the routines in place to ensure that students' behavior is planned and managed correctly? Who would you expect to get behind with their marking and their planning? Who would you expect to have a car that's likely to break down because it hasn't been well serviced? Tires aren't at the right pressure. There's no spare fuel, or not adequate fuel in the tank. Now that person, teacher B, is also likely to be late for a whole variety of reasons. They're also likely to be untidy. They're also likely to be chaotic. They're also likely to be disorganized, unplanned, etc., etc. So once you start to make improvement in an area, you can see it knock on to lots of other areas. And going back to the benefit of this, as well as making you different in all these areas, when you come across as organized and everything's well managed or just punctual, you can command far more respect. So if you're the one who always turns up for meetings on time, you're in a very powerful position when others don't turn up for meetings on time. You're the one who can turn around and say, well, I was here on time. I'm entitled to go on time. Or I was here on time. We've completed what we set out to do. It's time to go now. Those of you that have lots of meetings to attend, just this one aspect alone can make a big difference in the way that people who set those meetings and organize those meetings treat you. Okay, so you get the point. Lots to gain from this kind of self-improvement. So let's move on. Is it really possible to create time? Well, in the next 2 hours, well, sorry, in this case, it's going to be about an hour, you're going to learn lots of ways of having more time. And some of you, it might be 5 or 10 hours a week. For some of you, it might be more. It all depends on the way you currently work and the way your current day-to-day habits are managed. Now, notice what I said there. It depends on you. It's your habits, the way you work currently. This has nothing to do with your workload. It's not about the work or the pressures that you're facing. It's nothing to do with that at all. There are people running massive organizations in 4 or 5 hours a day, and they still have time for family life, hobbies, and fun. They have balance. And there are people who work 12 hours a day and can barely find time to sit down for a relaxed family meal. We've all got the exact same amount of time available to us every day. But the thing is that we use it differently. Some people can create amazing lives with the time they're given, and others waste it and create a life of struggle. Now, most of us fall somewhere in between the two. We get by and we build a life, but all the time we're fighting against the clock. It doesn't have to be that way. Interestingly, I recently read an article called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. This was a palliative nurse who recorded the most common regrets of her dying patients, and she put her findings into a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it didn't surprise me to see what made the list. It was all things that are so important to us, but that we struggle to pay attention to and make time for. Things that we love, truly, but we sacrifice them and miss out on them because we're so caught up with this busy, busy world. Time is our greatest gift, and we can use it wisely or we can waste it. But either way, we cannot get it back. Once that clock starts ticking, from the moment we're born, it carries on ticking at the same rate, without slowing down, without stopping, right until the day we die. So we can't manage time. This isn't about time management because we can't control time in any way. But although we can't control it, we really can create more of it. And there's an easy way that we do that. We create time by saving time. And the way we save time is by making changes to the way we invest and use the time available to us. So we can't manage time, but we can manage ourselves. And by learning how to manage our thoughts, our decisions, and our choices, we can actually create a significant amount of free time, all while reducing the pressure that we're under. So I said that we were going to cover 3 different areas: organization, efficiency, and focus. So the first area is organization, and we're going to look at to-do lists that work. Now, this quote here comes from a gentleman called David Allen, and he wrote a book called Getting Things Done. And the system that he details in that book is kind of the foundation of the declutter machine, which I'm going to introduce you to a little bit later on. It's basically a way of handling and processing all the information and data in your life. And in this information-rich world that we live in, that is very important. Having a way to process information that comes to us rather than just drowning in information overload is really, really useful. And that system has made a huge difference to my life since I started implementing it about 10 years ago with my business. But I think that quote is really important. Much of the stress that people feel doesn't come from having too much to do. It comes from not finishing what they've started. And of course, that is the problem with to-do lists. We all know this. We keep adding to them, and they get longer and longer, and they become like a dumping ground for unfinished projects and tasks and ideas that we're never going to get round to completing. So if that's a problem for you with to-do lists, I'm going to introduce you to a few things you can do which will really help and really change things. The first is to have 2 musts. Now, a must is something which, by its nature, must get done. This has to be done with no excuses whatsoever. These 2 things have to be done. Now, the idea is that we pick 2 things that are not impossible to achieve. Okay, so they've got to be achievable I wouldn't say easily, but they've certainly got to be doable, because what you're trying to do is create some forward momentum. You want to develop and experience that sense of achievement and satisfaction from having completed something. And that puts you in a very different state of mind to the one that is confronted by a huge list of tasks and chores, which never seems to end, because that just gives us this feeling of being demoralized. It's a feeling of failure. Every time we look at it, we're like, oh God, this is never ending. I'm never ever going to get through this, because it never finishes. But if you've got a to-do list which gets finished absolutely every day, without question, without fail, then you start to be in a completely different way of mind. You start to become focused on the idea of moving forward and completing things. So one of the things you need on your to-do list is a couple of things that absolutely must get done before everything else. Now, I'll tell you where this came from. Some of you know the story, but about 7 years ago, I was almost killed, and I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. And at the time of having this, my life was literally like a brick wall. I literally couldn't function. I got up in the morning, just about functioned enough to get a breakfast and mooch around the house, but to actually do anything productive was just, it couldn't happen. I was just in this state of yak. It was horrible place to be. And I went to a coach, and one of the things that she gave me, in fact, the only useful thing I got out of any form of counseling or coaching at that time, was this idea of having a must-do activity that had to be done come what may. And the one of the musts that I picked was to go for a run every day. And that run could be 5 minutes or it could be 5 miles. It didn't matter. The fact was that I put my trainers on and I got out of the house and I ran. The reason for that was I needed to burn off some adrenaline. I needed to break free of this highly anxious state that I was in. And get some endorphins going around my body. I knew that. I'd always been very fit prior to this. So I really wanted to get back on my feet, and I made it an absolute must that come what may, I would get on my feet, get my trainers on, get out the door, and I would go for either a 5-minute run or a 5-mile run, whatever it was. Invariably, the 5 minutes turned into 20 minutes, half an hour, even longer. Even right at the start, because once I got through the hurdle of getting started on something, continuing with that became much easier. So this idea of having something that is achievable and doable is really, really important. You don't want it to be a brick wall activity that you look at and think, oh God, I'm never going to get round to that. It's too difficult. It's too daunting. I knew that I could run for 5 minutes. So that was doable. And once I got over the hurdle of actually taking some action, I could then continue. So you pick two musts. Now, how do you pick them? Well, you could think about something which absolutely must be done, something on which other jobs are dependent, or something which has a fast approaching deadline attached to it. And if you're stuck, you can try forcing yourself. Just set a timer for 30 seconds and tell yourself that in those 30 seconds, you absolutely will pick one of those activities to be a must-do activity from your list. I like to have 2 on there because it just gets that feeling of, yes, we're getting things done. You can have 1. I wouldn't have more than 3, okay? But these are must-do activities that absolutely will get done every day. Or it can be a habit that you're wanting to instill, like it was for me. For me, it was the habit of going for a run. It can be the habit of writing in your diary or journal. It could be the habit of having a healthy breakfast. Whatever change you want to make, then that can become a must. Or if it's just getting through things that you know have got to be done and you've been putting off for ages, then they become your musts. The second thing is to have a maximum of 7 to 10 tasks on your list. Now, I'll explain a story in a moment about when to-do lists were first, the idea of them was first put together. Probably 7 was about the maximum that you would have, but I know that some people like to think they can get an awful lot of stuff done, and some of the jobs are very small. So sometimes I'll have as many as 10 tasks on my list, but it will be things that I know that I can get done. There's one thing which has come up already on the slide there. It wasn't supposed to come up to the next one. that will make the biggest difference in terms of getting your to-do list complete. And it will also stop you from putting a never-ending list of tasks and chores on it. And that is to have a deadline for each task. So if, let's say, one of the jobs on my list is to mark Year 8's history books, I'll explain why that's a bad choice of task in a moment, but that task might take me 3 or 4 hours. If I then have another task on there, such as tidy out the science lab, or clean the whole floor, or help Mrs. Jones plan the trip to go to Paris, each one of those things could literally take hours. And before I know it, there's absolutely no way that each one of those tasks could be completed within the realms of one single day, or one single work day of say 6-7 hours. So if you give a deadline to each task, okay, I've got to mark Year 8 history books, and I know that's going to take me 2 hours, then I know that in a 6-hour day, I've only got 4 hours available for other tasks. So each task must have a time limit, an estimated time of completion next to it. And that way you know how much time is going to be used up in your day. And I don't really plan for more than about 6 hours of actual work time in my business, because I know that there's always a buffer. Interruptions come up, distractions happen, and you get thrown off course a little bit. And things do tend to take a little bit longer. So I don't plan out for a whole 8 hours. I plan for about 6 hours, knowing that there will be a bit of spillage. The next thing is to split your bigger projects into small tasks. So there's a saying that how do you eat an elephant? You eat it a little piece at a time. If you eat meat, I don't actually eat meat, but if I did, I don't think I'd ever eat an elephant actually. But anyway, so a big project is mark Year 8 history books. And that's quite a big task, okay? To do that in one sitting, I don't know how long that would take. History assignments tend to take quite a bit of marking. So that could take 3 hours, 4 hours even. And that's too big to be one job on a to-do list. So instead what I would do is I would break that up into small tasks. And I would say, right, I'm going to mark 12 books in the next 30 minutes. Or I'm going to take 30 minutes and mark as many books as I can. So my task will be marking 30 minutes. Okay. One last thing about to-do lists, and that is once you've got your items on that list, when you approach each item, you focus on it and nothing else. You focus on that item until it is completed and nothing else. Now I'm going to explain the focus method towards the end of the session that will help you do this. But I'll tell you a little story as to why it's really useful to do this, and how to-do lists actually came about. The idea of to-do lists, or the main theme behind them, is a productivity system which was reportedly sold to a gentleman called Charles Schwab, who worked for the famous industrialist Andrew Carnegie. And that system was sold to them for $25,000, which is around $400,000 in today's money. And the way this came about was Schwab was looking for some help in terms of getting the business going. They had the ideas, they had all the tools and the resources to make a great success of the business, but they weren't able to implement things. They were finding that they were just spinning the wheels. So they called in a management consultant called Ivy Lee. And Ivy Lee said, look, in 15 minutes, I'm going to show you how you can get your organization doing at least 50% more. And if all your staff, all your executives use this method, then you'll have your wish of turning this company around. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you the system, use it, judge its value, and then you send me a check for whatever you think it's worth. And that's a very famous conversation in terms of productivity and management that took place with Charles Schwab, and he ended up paying $25,000. The system was this. What Ivy Lee said was that all you've got to do is write a list of 5 or 6 important things that you need to do tomorrow. Not things that go beyond 5 or 6 things, and not things that are just a waste of time. It's got to be 5 or 6 really important things that have to be done to move you forward. Now, the important thing is, once you've prioritized them, putting the most important thing at the top, you focus on that one thing before moving to the next thing on the list. So you have 5 or 6 things on a list. You focus on them one at a time, doing the most important one first and then working through the list. And at the end of the day, if you've got any unfinished tasks, they move to a new list of 5 or 6 items for the next day. And then you repeat this process. So that simple process was sold for $25,000. And that is basically a to-do list. There's a company called, well, I don't know what the company is called, but the technique they sell is called Pomodoro. And Pomodoro is basically the same process. You have a list of things which have to be done, a list of tasks. You order them in order of importance, prioritize them in order of importance. You pick the first one, you focus on it and nothing else, you get it done, and then you move on to the next one. Now that simple system, believe it or not, is taught all over the world. They have licensed trainers going into companies and charging them a fortune to teach them that one simple process. So there you go. You've got everything you need now, and you got it for next to nothing, and it's worth $25,000. Well, I see that there's a slight problem with that, and I'm sure you know the problem as well. It is difficult to focus, particularly in this really busy world of ours. It's getting more and more difficult to focus. Our brains are used to switching from one thing to another very, very fast. The internet has done that to us. There have been books written about the way the internet has affected our brains. We have a very shallow depth of concentration, and we tend to flip from one thing to another. So focusing is very difficult for people, not just in terms of their ability to focus, but also the amount of distraction that's going on in the world. So that's why when I came across this focus method a few weeks ago at my dad's house when I was doing some renovations, and it made such a huge difference, I thought, God, I've got to share this. This is really, really important. It's really, really useful. So that's to-do lists. And that is something that actually forms part of the next thing we're going to look at, which is the declutter machine. And this is the kind of organizational processing system that I learned from David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done. Now, in your download area, you'll find instructions for this. As I said, it's been on my website for quite a while and people have downloaded it as, I think it's the Teacher Time Management Plan. But I'm calling it now the Declutter Machine because it makes more sense to me. And this is basically, as I say, it's a way of organizing all the thoughts and all the information that you've got swimming around your head or swimming around your desk. It's just a way of handling those things and putting them in storage bins, if you want, or allocating them to different files and folders so that you can always find everything you need. But also it's a way of processing new information that comes in so that you're not left with an inbox that's filled with 5,000 emails. You're not left with a desk that's piled up with paper and books and resources all over the place. And you're not left with a brain that is just so full that, like a computer that's hard drive is full, it works slowly and inefficiently. Okay, what you need are project folders and sorry about the slide, that and should not be there. So you need project folders, you need daily to-do lists. So we've just covered to-do lists, and what I do in my own system here is I have a to-do list for each day of the week. So I sit down at the end of the previous week, say on a Sunday or a Friday, and I go through what needs to be done for the next week. I'll explain this again. And I write my to-do lists for the week so that I know what I'm going to be doing throughout the week, more or less. And that changes. That has to be flexible because new information comes in and things get completed early or they carry over to the next day. So they do change, but I have a broad idea of what I need to do week in, week out. You've got something called your update list, which I'll come to, and a diary or a calendar. So the project folders, basically a project folder is just a folder. Now that can be an online folder, or it can be, as I have, one of those card folders. And I make my card folders really, really nice so that I look after them. I have a Letraset machine so that I can label each folder. And I have one for each an important aspect of my life. So for example, for home, these are just suggested titles. I do have some of these, but you might have them and more, or those and less. So holidays, utilities, bank accounts, home improvements, passports, health, car, appliance, instructions, etc. So if I was to take, for example, holidays, in my holidays folder, I would put, whenever I'm going about my day, if somebody tells me, oh, I've just been on a brilliant holiday, this hotel was absolutely phenomenal, or we went to this youth hostel and it was out of this world, or we're thinking of going here, you should see what it's like, then I get those details and they go into that folder. So again, it might be online, or in my case, I use a proper card folder, and the information goes in there. So I know that if ever I'm looking for somewhere that is a really good hotel or a really good place to go, I've got somewhere straight away as a first point of reference, recommended to me by others, or places that we've been before, etc. Also, if I've got a holiday coming up, then anything to do with that holiday, such as a list of all the things that we need, the plan, all the relevant data and forms and insurance certificates and everything else to do with that, go in that form. With utilities, anything to do with our gas or our water or our LPG, whatever it is, goes into the utilities folder. So basically, I mean, some people do this naturally and are really, really good at filing and administration. I am not. I'm absolutely shocking at it. I've struggled with it all my life. And until I got this system going, my life consisted of just bits of paper everywhere. And I wasted so much time in trying to do simple tasks and just basically getting through the day. So depending on where you are on the organizational spectrum, you might be really, really good at this and you do all this already, then great, we can learn from you. But if not, there's always improvements can be made. So I'm giving you what works for me. I'm sure there are things you could do beyond this, or you don't have to quite go this far. But this, for me, as it is, really works well. So in terms of school, my teacher project folders, I put a few there that might be relevant. Trips and excursions, so any trips that other year groups have been on or that we're planning on going on, everything goes into that folder. A trip that's coming up, we have a list of the coach company, insurance, everything else, etc. Just like holidays for your home folders. Meeting notes and agendas, CPD courses I want to go on or I'm thinking of going on. Resource ideas, things that I see on TV or things that I see in magazines, they can just go in there. Templates is a really important one. For templates, I'm talking about things that you use once but could really do with copying, so that next time you have to do the activity again, it's already there for you. So if I'm writing a letter to a parent, I can reinvent the wheel every time I speak to a parent and go about writing a letter from scratch every time. Or I can just pull up a template that's on my laptop. If I use the template, it's probably going to save me about 10 minutes in writing from scratch. And templates can cover all areas of your job. You can have, actually, I'll come to templates a little bit later on. So newspaper clippings, magazine articles, etc. about your topic or any other aspect of the job. And then obviously you'll have your class folders with individual student details and everything else. So that's the folders aspect of this. And this is the way that it works. Really, really simple. All I do is I have my to-do list for the day. So I've got my list of 2 musts and 5 or 6 jobs that need doing that day. And I focus on them and I get them done and I cross them off. If, while I'm doing that, while I'm going about my day, new information comes in, such as a teacher comes in and says, oh, we've got a meeting on the 10th of November, then that will go into my diary or my calendar. Or if they come in and say, hey, I found this brilliant piece of information about some new equipment that you could do within your room, then that goes either into the relevant folder or onto a list called the update list. Now, the problem with trying to put things in folders all the time is that you'd have to carry an awful lot of folders around with you all the time, and that gets quite cumbersome. So to get around having to carry your project folders with you everywhere, you just have this one sheet of paper or one folder, and everything new goes either onto that list or into that folder. And then at the end of the day, you can update your next to-do list if you've not got all your tasks done on your current to-do list, or if any of that new information that's coming is pertinent and relevant to the next day. And then in addition to all that, you perform a weekly review. And the weekly review is simply to go back to that single folder or single sheet of paper that you've been carrying around with you, your update list or update folder, and you then take that information and put it into the relevant project folder or onto your to-do lists so that that information gets acted on over the next week, or it goes into your diary and your calendar. And that's basically the system I use. So I've got placeholders for all my information, and I can field any interruptions, any new data off to those placeholders without interrupting my life too much, and so that when I need them and want them, I can easily find them. That's basically it. That is the declutter machine. Okay, we're on to efficiency. So I reckon you can save 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 hours a week, maybe more, with something called batching. Now, batching, you might not be familiar with that term, but I'm sure you'll be familiar with the idea of it. It's basically where we group similar tasks together to reduce the time that's lost when you switch between one or more completely different tasks. Now, if you think about it, multitasking is something that's really praised in our society now. You know, the more things you can get done at once, the better. But actually, there's lots of scientific studies being done on the benefits, or rather drawbacks, of multitasking, and the way it is actually really bad and really inefficient. So multitasking doesn't work. Batching, where we put things together using the same thought processes and the same resources and the same tools and the same actions, is going to save us time. It stops us having to flip between one job or one task or one thought process and another. So let me give you an example from my business. When I first started out, I had zero administration skills. I started my first training company, Behaviour Needs, as a teacher who then went on to train other teachers to work with students with behaviour problems. And at that stuff, I was all right. I could teach well. I knew the stuff about handling students and handling behaviour, and I enjoyed getting up in front of people, and I enjoyed the interaction, and I enjoyed imparting what I knew to these other people. However, that's only one small part of running a business. There's also administration, there's dealing with the website and all the technical issues, there's bookkeeping, there's marketing, there's advertising, there's communication, there's planning, there's organising events, there's organising venues, all those sorts of things. Hopeless. I mean, absolutely hopeless. So what I would do is every day it would just see me flitting from one task to another. So I might start off doing some marketing, writing an email or a sales letter, and then an email would pop up with an urgent bill I'd forgotten for 2 months, and then I'd spend half an hour going through my finances and trying to find the relevant documents relating to that bill, promising that I'd never let things get that bad again. And then I'd have to go into town to withdraw some money and get back and put that in the bank, so because this was before internet banking was the way it is now. And then on the way home, I'd meet somebody, or I'd get drawn off somewhere else, and then I'd realize I needed some stationery supplies, so I'd go back in the car into town. I mean, it was just backwards and forwards and up and down like a yo-yo. My life was just a mess. I was just drawn from one thing to another. Now, that seems extreme, I know, but that's actually the true state that I was in. But jumping from one task to another with no planning, with no forethought, is something that many of us do. And if we can batch tasks together, then we can save hours of time. You know, if you think about it, that example I just gave you then, think of all the different thought processes and all the different skills and all the different modes of working and all the different pathways in my brain that were being used between those different activities. You know, doing bookkeeping is very different to writing a sales letter or something creative. Doing something physical like going into town or buying something or interacting with people is very different to doing all the other things in the business. So I was having to change between modes of operation all the time, and that just wastes time. There are lots of experts have looked into this, and they estimate that it takes between 5 minutes and about 20 minutes to really get settled on a topic and really get involved in it and really get into a positive state of workflow. Now, if you're constantly chopping and changing between tasks, you never get into that state. You never get into that optimal, efficient way of working. Here's another little example. I used to put just £20 in my car of fuel. So £20 I used to spend on diesel in my car. Now, I don't know what my thought processes were around that. It was something to do with not wanting to spend loads of money in one go. But in doing so, I was wasting an awful lot of time, because we drive a four-wheel drive and we live in the country. So, you know, we're doing a lot of driving and we get through fuel. And I could make 3 or 4 stops a week sometimes, depending on what we've been doing. So now I fill the tank at each visit. And I reckon by filling the tank rather than just putting 20 quid in, so that's about £80 put in the car instead of £20, I reckon we save about 100 stops at the petrol station every year. So that's 100 stops, and that's conservative, at say 5 minutes a time, which is very conservative, because the number of times you get stuck behind 3 or 4 people, or something breaks down with the till, or you get into a conversation with someone, or there's a problem in some way. So 5 minutes is really conservative. Even at that estimate, though, that means about 10 hours a year is being saved. Now, that doesn't sound a lot, but that's about an hour a month, and it could easily be 2 hours a month just from changing one thing, my petrol habits. Just imagine if you look at various aspects of your life, various aspects of your job, and you start batching them together. And you start doing things in bulk, and you start cutting down on the number of interactions and the number of moving parts. You save a lot of effort and a lot of time. Similarly, when my daughter was a baby and time really seemed to be against us, my wife and I used to do batch cooking, which I'm sure most of you have heard of or maybe even practice. Now, that is such an easy way to free up masses of time. Everybody now has a freezer, and that can just make such a difference. It means you have a few hours where you batch cook a load of main meals or a load of desserts, and you put them in the freezer. You've saved money by buying in bulk. You've saved time by cooking in bulk. And it takes all the thinking out of making healthy choices when you need a quick meal. Now, you don't do it for every single meal. Obviously, there's joy in taking your time over cooking and socializing and sitting down with family. But you can save an awful lot of time just for those periods where you need a quick meal, a healthy meal. So let's have a look at a few things that we could batch. Let's put it in the context of teaching. So for me, in a single free period of an hour in a morning, you know, when you sit down in the staff room to do some work or in your room, you might get a few minutes in and then remember that you've got some planning to do that you've forgotten for an emergency lesson, or you've been handed a note that you've got a cover lesson to do, or it's something that you've forgotten. So you break away from doing that marking to doing something completely different. You know, now you've got to get your planner out and your scheme of work, and then you discover that you need to photocopy some resources for the lesson. So off you trot to the photocopier, and there you meet somebody, one of your colleagues, and you have a 5-minute chat, and then you check your pigeonhole or your staff drawer on the way back, and you pick up a memo and you decide you're going to deal with it there and then. And before you know it, that hour has gone. That is totally inefficient. By batching tasks and working in the way you're going to learn throughout this, you can keep your head focused on a particular set of skills. And when we come to the Zen focus method at the end, I'll show you how to go through those tasks, as I've said, much more efficiently. So these are a few tasks that you could batch in terms of teaching. Fairly obvious ones, and you probably work in this way. I guess some people do this fairly automatically. I'm sorry about the odd letter that's missing on these slides. It's something to do with the software that I've used. It's not just my spelling. Photocopying is actually photocopying, or it should be. So photocopying all done at once, marking all done at once, planning all done at once, report writing all done at once, administration all done in a set period of time, all your calls to parents all done at once. Just by doing them in one chunk of time, or in several chunks of time, but just focusing on one task, you become really efficient because you're repeating the same processes. That's the idea of the batching. Okay, something else you can do in terms of efficiency is outsourcing and automating. Now, I'll tell you a really interesting story about this. Well, I found it very interesting anyway when I read it. Um, and I read it in a book called, I think it was Life Leverage by a guy called Rob Moore. It's very targeted towards marketing and business, but this story really, really interested me. It's a story of a marketing executive who worked for a firm, I think it was in the States, and he was earning about $200,000 a year. Okay, so it was a high level marketing executive. So he's working for this firm, and his job is to handle a load of fairly big clients. He's got to manage these clients' accounts and make sure that their marketing is looked after. And what he did was he outsourced his entire job to China. So he found a marketing agency that he could work with in China, and he paid them $50,000 a year to do his job for him. And he got fired, actually, from the company that he was working for. Now, it depends what your viewpoint is on this, but he was getting the work done, and he was actually getting the work done to a very, very high standard. It wasn't costing the company any more. They were still paying his wage, and he was able to do other work in addition to what he was doing. So he was definitely winning. The company in China were winning because they got work. His clients were looked after because he did all the face-to-face interaction. He just didn't do the back-end work. And the company didn't miss out at all. Everyone was a winner as far as I could see. So I'm surprised they fired him. I would have promoted him myself. But anyway, the idea of outsourcing things like that, I mean, it almost gets to the point where students can be outsourcing their work to China, going online and using some of these freelancing sites, getting their homework done, their essays done, and everything else. So perhaps we need to watch for that. I don't think as teachers we can go to anywhere near that extent, those extremes, because we very much need to be in the loop for all aspects of our students' learning, and that's only right. But we can still use this strategy and save a lot of time. So these are some outsourceable tasks that you could consider. One is the area of resource creation. Now, creating really exciting lessons is something I think that you need to be involved in. You can take ideas from books, you can take ideas from courses and things to get ideas for activities, etc., etc. And I think although you're pulling in ideas from elsewhere, nobody's reinventing the wheel. You take ideas, you borrow from here, there, and everywhere, and you pull it together and you make it your own. And very much, I think the teacher needs to be involved in the creation of the actual lesson and the lesson activities. But in terms of resources, i.e., props and things that you're going to use to capture the students' attention and imagination, then I don't see anything wrong with outsourcing that bit, because some of us are really good at design and creating and building things, and some of us aren't, and that's fine. The best thing to do in that respect is to give the work to somebody who's really good at it. So I used to get resources created online on a site called Elance. Now that site has now changed. It's become something called Upwork. But the principle is the same. There are people all over the world who are good at design. It was mainly designers I was using. And I got materials created for some of my lessons. So let's say I was putting on a film lesson. So I wanted to create the idea of going into the cinema for my students. Rather than just show a video, I wanted to make an event of it. So I had popcorn boxes and I had film posters up and everything else. And there were no posters around the film I was showing. I think it was Holes by Louis Sacher. So I got some posters created. I got film posters created. I've had packaging created for other lessons. And one of the things that I had done for my business, I mean, I use outsources all the time for my business, but one of the things I used for behavior needs was a banknote. It was a fake banknote, a toy banknote called the Bank of Behavior. And on that banknote, it's available in dollars, euros, and pounds. You may have seen it. It's downloadable on my website in the free resources section. But basically, on one side, it says Bank of Behavior. These are the values that you have portrayed, and on the back it says these are the behaviors that you've portrayed. So it's got appropriate behaviors and good values. And there's no way I could have created that. I mean, it looks like a banknote. It's brilliant. And I had that created, and I think it cost me about £5 or £10 to have it done. There's another site called Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com, walldisplaytime.com. And that site has changed a bit. It used to be that any job you got done on there cost you £5, $5 rather, but now they've upped it and it is more expensive, but still you can get brilliant things done. I've had videos done as starter activities for lessons. I've had videos done. I had a video of Elvis, a cartoon of Elvis Presley singing about the drawbacks of being noisy in lessons. I think that cost me about $5. It's incredible what you can get created. You come up with the ideas and you get people to do them for you. Wall displays. There's a great idea here that can save you a lot of time. Now, some of us are really good at doing displays, classroom displays, and some of us not so. I fall into the not so, but okay category. So sometimes I've done amazing wall displays, but they have taken up so much time. The kids have loved seeing the work on them, big 3D displays, but most of the time I'd end up doing something which I considered substandard because I didn't want to waste or didn't want to spend loads of time doing that. It took me away from other things. Now, I've outsourced that to my teaching assistant in the past. One of them was very, very good at it, but sadly she went on to do other things. My other teaching assistant was like me, sometimes good and sometimes not so good. So what we did in one of the schools I worked in was we created what we called the display team. And that consisted of the art department, who ran a little mini workshop now and again to train students to be experts at putting up wall displays. So they learned about lettering and they learned about spacing and shape and balance and all these different things, putting colours together, etc., borders and things and frames. And their job was to put displays up all around the school. So as a teacher, when you'd finished a unit of work, you got all the kids' work together, you got all the resources together that you wanted to go on the wall, you contacted the display team, they came in, they said, "Where do you want your display team, sir?" You tell them, and bada bing, bada bong, up goes a really, really cool display done by the kids. The art department usually got involved as well, but it meant that wonderful displays went up around the school without us having to actually do it. The kids got all that acknowledgement and the joy of being responsible and showing off their skills. It works for everyone. Class duties. So in your classroom, you can often get tied down with all the administration. Give those to the kids. Again, it's a way of giving them responsibility, and a lot of kids need and shine with responsibility. So things like doing the register, obviously, collecting money in for trips, handing out forms, handing out books. The next one down there, equipment management. So if it's, kids are much better with technology than us, let's face it. So if you're using technology in your lesson or audio-visual equipment, get some of the students to manage all that for you and look after it so that when you go into the lesson, it's already set up. At the end of the lesson, it's all taken down. And then photocopying, again, students to do it or teaching assistant to do it. Any job that you can delegate off to someone else is going to save you time. Now, you can also use this at home. A lot of people looking at that list think, well, two things. One, I can't afford to outsource that. Or two, I actually quite like doing some of that. And that's fine. Both of those are great. But if you consider that your time is probably worth about £25 an hour at least, it's up to you what you value your time at. But I reckon about £25 an hour for most teachers who say were to work privately and do some private tutoring. If you were going to do some tutoring on a Saturday or in the evening, you'd probably charge about £25 an hour. So that means if you were to pay someone £8 an hour to do some cleaning at home or some gardening or your washing and your ironing, think how much time you would save, and you're still in profit. So your time is worth more than the £8 an hour. Your time is worth more than being spent doing these other tasks, and you can use that time elsewhere. If you like gardening, then fine, use that for relaxation. If you like ironing, fine, use it for relaxation. But if it is causing you stress and it's taking up your time, consider outsourcing it. Like shopping. Most supermarkets now offer delivery, and whether or not you agree with big supermarkets with their policies and their packaging and everything else, it's just a choice you make. Do you want to spend 2, 3, 4 hours a week shopping on different trips, depending on how far you have to travel, how much time you have to spend parking, and how much time you have to go wading around and standing in queues in a shopping centre, or do you want to just offload it and save yourself 3, 4 hours a week for the cost of the delivery from the supermarket? I know which I prefer. Home repairs, again, some people say, well, I'm good at this stuff. I'm not particularly good at it. I'll have a go now and again, but invariably I make a mistake and I cause more damage and more time and more cost than I should have done by just outsourcing it and having somebody else in there. So my go-to is a friend of mine who's a builder, and he does most of our repairs. Same with car repairs. I always use a garage. I don't do any of that myself. I'll change a wheel, I'll do a little bit, but in my view, I think it's one job, one expert. You know, whoever's good at that thing, give it to them. Now, I'll put childminding at the end there. It's a little bit contentious because I think we should spend as much time as possible with our children. Relationships are so important. But now and again, we want to go out, we want to relax, we want to socialize, and we get a babysitter. Now, just as you might use a babysitter to go out and have a bit of fun once or twice a week, there's nothing wrong with having a childminder come round to your house and give you a bit of time to do some of the work. We have a childminder who comes round, not regularly. It's just now and again. If my wife and I are tied up doing a stint of work for the website or some writing or getting a course together, then we'll have one of the neighbours' girls come over and she'll look after Poppy, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, where we can have a real blitz getting some work done. And that wouldn't be possible, certainly not in the holidays, if we're just spending all our time with Poppy. Poppy's my daughter, by the way. She's not a plant. Sorry. Okay, efficiency. Systems, templates, and checklists. Just very quickly, because I think this is fairly obvious, that's a recipe book in the background. And I think if you have systems and templates and checklists in place, the idea that it is like a recipe. Okay, you do something once, and unless it's already ingrained in you and it's something that you do habitually, then you forget really exactly what it was you did. And next time you come to it, it's very different, or you have to start again. You've got to learn again. You've got to redo it all. So in the case of making a chocolate cake, the first chocolate cake you do without reading the recipe book, the next chocolate cake is going to be very different. But if you follow the recipe, you can get the same every single time. So the idea is that anytime you do something such as setting up a piece of equipment in the science lab, or using a new DVD player, or setting up a new program in the computer labs, it's something that is unfamiliar to us. So what would make it really simple is if we have a checklist to follow. Step 1, use this button here. Step 2, put this in this batch here. Step 3, etc. Now, if you've got that checklist, next time you come to do that task, it's going to save you a lot of time by just following it. Equally, that checklist is something that you can then give to one of your delegated members of your team. You can outsource that task. So checklists can save a lot of time, as can templates. A template, of course, is a framework for producing something. So, for example, if you're writing letters to parents, as I said earlier, rather than reinventing the wheel and coming up with a new letter every single time, have a template on your computer that you can just pull up. Have a template for writing reports with scripts in, so that if you're writing a good report, you've got a range of answers that you can choose from. If you're writing a mediocre report, you've got a range of answers that you can use. It stops you having to think on your feet. Now, obviously, creativity and using our brains, that's important. We don't want to become brain dead, but we're talking about saving time here. So templates and checklists are important, and they really effectively become parts of a system. When you have a range of templates and checklists for writing reports, or for getting in touch with parents, or for dealing with behavior, or for setting up a lesson in your a lesson that captures students right from the start, and then has a range of activities to keep them engaged, and then has a follow-up activity at the end as a summary, and then has homework that follows on, that becomes a system that you can replicate. The idea here is that don't just do something once and then have to repeat it in a completely different manner. When I first started my training business, that's the mistake I made. I would do seminars up and down the country and workshops, and every single one was started from scratch. So I had a totally new script, a totally new set of slides, a totally new set of resources. It was crazy. I wasted so much time from not having off-the-shelf projects and off-the-shelf resources and off-the-shelf presentations that I could use. I can't even believe I worked like that, but that's the way it was. So save yourself time by using systems. Okay, let me just find where I am and have a little slurp of my tea. Excuse me for a moment. My tea, which is now cold. Okay. Just a few reminders there. There is a company there called timesaversforteachers.com. That's a friend of mine, Stephen Cranyan, and he has created a load of templates and checklists specifically for saving teachers time. So if you want to go over to his website, timesaversforteachers.com, you can mention that I sent you there. That'd be cool. But basically, he's got resources there that can help. This is just a comment from someone on one of the forums that I took off who'd been using the batching method. And I just think sometimes we know about these things, you know, we're aware that batching and outsourcing, these things exist. You know, we know they're there and we think, oh yeah, well, I've already heard that. I know all about that. But to know and not to do is really a bit silly. You know, if you know it works, then putting it into operation is what actually makes the magic happen. And sometimes we just need a motivation to make us do that. So the more times we hear of and see other people succeeding in some way, I think sometimes that can give us the kick that we need. So this is just one girl who's made some massive changes. So much better to lose only one day than 2 or 3 weekends and several evenings. I'm less stressed because I don't even allow myself to think about them until that day. It is amazing how much you can do when you work with a singular focus. And that is exactly what we're going to look at now. Focusing. Right. So the idea of focusing is to get over something called task jumping. It's the heart of efficiency and productivity. As I've said, when we're task jumping and going from one job to another, we lose time. And a task that could just end up taking us an hour can take us all day because we end up being pulled in lots of different directions. And that becomes not just a time drain, but it's an energy drain. You know, if you imagine you sit down or you get into the kitchen to start to cook a meal, and first thing you do is get all the ingredients out of the fridge and out of the cupboards. And then you go to the other cupboards and get the necessary pots and pans. And you're just about to start with all the right utensils and everything else. And then you decide halfway through all that you're going to just do a barbecue. We'll just do a barbecue instead. It's a nice day. So all that stuff goes away. And then it takes time and a mental energy shift to get into this new way of working. You've got to get different ingredients together. You've got to get different utensils together. You've got to put all the other stuff away. You've got to warm the barbecue up. You've got to deal with completely different methods and completely different resources. And then when you're halfway through setting your barbecue up, just before you light it, you think, oh, bugger it, we'll just go out for a pizza instead. And then all your time and your energy goes into booking the restaurant and getting the car ready and getting the kids ready and getting everybody ready. Which one are we going to go to? Oh, no, I don't want to go for pizza. I want to go to Indian instead. So it's just backwards and forwards from task to task and energy going and time going. And it's really, really frustrating. And that's one of the reasons why constantly leaving social media apps open on either your phone or your computer is such a bad idea. You know, whether it's Facebook or email or any other of your social media, ping, pang, buzz, ting, whatever noises your phone makes, they can be so bad for us because social media, just by its nature, there's so many different reasons for people getting in touch, and that just invites far too many distractions. So this is where the Zen focus method comes in. It's basically a way of dealing with task jumping and going from one thing to another. Now, I think the best thing I can do is what I did last night, and that is to explain how this came about, and then we'll go into, we'll break it down and see what you actually do. The idea is, or the principle of it is that you don't need to bother about distractions. You don't need to be shutting things out. Because dealing with distractions is actually a fun part of the process. And when we try to shut out distractions, when we try to get conditions absolutely perfect for concentration, we actually create ourselves a fair amount of stress, because you get everything shut down, and there's a part of you that's saying, oh, where's the next distraction coming from? I know that bloody phone's going to go in a minute again, ting. So we're actually finding ourselves looking out for distractions because we're shutting distractions out. So this is one of the reasons why this is so effective. Anyway, I'll tell you how it came about. Oh, just as a little bit of an aside, in case you don't know, I'm actually I'm an school teacher, but I'm also now, or have been for about the last 7 years, a mindfulness teacher. And the reason why I went into mindfulness with my wife is that, as I mentioned briefly before, we were almost killed about 7 years ago. And we ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the only thing, and I mean the only thing that worked, we tried everything to get our health back and our sanity back. The only thing that worked for us was learning how to relax deeply. And the tool that we used for that was mindfulness. And I swore after about 2 years of being in a very dark place that if I actually managed to get my life back, whatever it was would be the thing that I would spend my time doing. And it's just been a joyous journey of discovery since getting on this path. And it's left me incredibly grateful to the man who almost killed us, because it completely changed my life. And this is something that has helped me eradicate many of the flaws, as I call them, with my character beforehand. I was very ADHD type, disorganized, rushing around, heading for a burnout. In fact, I did burn out completely at one point. And these mindfulness methods have really helped me change all that for the better, for the much better. Now, I've been used to teaching people in a classroom environment, in various work environments, but I've never approached an outdoor task like renovating a house, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, and applied mindfulness to it for some reason. I just, it was quite alien to me how this happened, and it was such a shock that it was so effective, which is the reason I'm here doing this program now. But basically, the method that I'm going to share with you is a mindfulness method. I tend not to say mindfulness very often with people, certainly not up front, because as soon as they hear that word, they switch off, thinking, oh, I've heard what that is. Yeah, you just concentrate on the present moment. Oh, yeah, it doesn't work. But actually, when you learn a little bit more about it, and you, more to the point, you practice it a little bit, it creates incredible change. So I'll tell you how it came about, and then we'll dissect it a little bit. So my father died about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and he left us, well, we got 2 houses, one for my mother and one for my father, because she died as well. And I've had these houses out for rent for a few years, and one of them was in a terrible state. My dad's house was in a terrible state from the last tenant, and I decided that I wanted to go and put some of myself into doing it up, rather than just getting a building firm in. I wanted to be involved in it, because I felt I kind of owed that almost to my dad. I felt it was something I wanted to do. There was a bit of connection there. So I got a friend of mine who's a builder to start the work, and I was kind of project managing it and labouring for him. Anyway, every morning I would arrive and I would be confronted by a mass of different jobs. I had this huge list of things that needed doing. I made the list when I first went round the property. I said, right, that needs doing, that needs doing, that needs doing. So I got this huge list. And every time I went in, the list just didn't seem to go down. You know, there was things like paint the outside fence, fix the outside fence, clear the path, lay the lawn, do all the weeding, move all the old chilies and the old gravel, knock down a wall, put the rubble away, clear away the damp in the shower and in the bathroom, mend the bath. Kitchen needed a new worktop. There was a few blinds needed doing. There's all these jobs, like masses and masses of jobs. And what was going on was, I would start doing one, and then I would get a bit bored, and I would start doing another, and nothing was getting finished. Nothing was getting completed. So on this particular day, gorgeous sunny weather, we've had a heat wave in the UK. So I get there and I start doing a bit of shoveling, and I'm shoveling chilies, little stones off the pathway. And I'd probably do about 10 minutes, and then I stopped to change the radio channel on my phone, because it wasn't the music that I wanted to listen to. And then another 5 minutes in, I found myself actually wanting to check my phone again, but this time been reminded of a text conversation I've been having with my son, a bit of an argument actually. So I wanted to go back and check the conversations. So I checked it, there was no new messages, but then as I went back to doing the shoveling, that was just playing on my mind. So these messages kept coming into my head, or what did he say last time, and what should I say? So that conversation was going on in my brain. Then I would start on a new patch of shoveling. You know, I got bored with the bit I was on, so I'd start on a new patch, and then another job would catch my eye, or I could just go and clear a few of those weeds over there. And then there was a pile of rubble bags on the driveway, bags of rubble that needed to be loaded into the truck. So I thought, oh, that needs doing as well. So I'll start that for a bit. Then I got to one bag that split open and rubble went everywhere. So I left that job and I went back to shoveling. Then my phone went off again, so I went and checked that. Then I wanted to check the weather because we were going on holiday the week after. So I started doing that for a bit. I fancied a drink. And oh my God, I was just backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. And I know from talking to people that that method of working, of flitting from one thing to another, just because we're drawn to a job or we're drawn away from another job, is just so common. You know, we get to something that's a little bit difficult and we leave it and we go on and do something that's a bit easier. It's like, I need to do that, but I'll just do this bit first. And we never get back to that other bit. So in just about 2 hours, other than loading up a few bags of rubble onto a truck and winding myself up with this text conversation, I'd done virtually nothing. Nothing was getting done. And I realized that this was the way it had been for like the last few weeks. You know, I'd just been getting nothing really done. And I'm paying a fortune to my builder friend as well. We're just not getting the work done. So I thought, right, this has got to change. I'm going to set a goal. I used to do this a lot when I was running and doing training and things. You know, I know about goals. So I said, right, for the next half hour, I'm going to do this. Now, this goal is different perhaps to the goals we've heard of in other areas. This is not one of those SMART goals, you know, specific and measurable and achievable and whatever the R stands for and timed. It's not a SMART goal. It's not productivity 101. It's not normal goal setting. Because when you talk about goals in terms of mindfulness, setting a goal becomes quite stressful. If I don't achieve that goal, then I'm going to get stressed. And I'm hell-bent on achieving that goal. So I'm creating stress right the way through the job. So this goal is just what I call a loose goal. It's a target, it's a destination to aim for, but I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't get there. I've just basically set my compass, set my rudder, set my sail to go in this direction. And my direction is, I'm going to dig this trench for the next 30 minutes. Now, I might get to the end of the trench in that time. Great. But it's not the be all and end all. I'm not rigidly attached to the outcome, and that's really important. Okay, I've got a destination, but if I don't get there, I'm not going to beat myself up. Well, there's no stress involved in this. This is now starting to become a little bit more achievable and a little bit more enjoyable. But as I set off, the usual problem happens. My mind is a whir of activity. It's almost as if it's actively and purposefully looking for distractions, anything to stop me focusing on this job, anything to procrastinate, anything to put me off, to stall, to switch me away from it. Now, here's the magic. There's a big difference now in the way these same distractions are affecting me, because I'm no longer bothered or swayed by them. And that is a conscious decision that I'm making. I'm consciously deciding not to be bothered by these distractions. What was happening before was that there was no awareness, there was no conscious involvement from me, there was no choice going on. I was just unconsciously reacting to whatever popped up in front of me or whatever popped up in my head. And that unconscious state is the reason why we can't focus. It's the reason why we can't make decisions. It's the reason why we just flip from one thing to another and waste so much time. We spend our lives going around in this state of autopilot or being unconscious. And you know this yourself because you've been in the car when you've set off to go to work or to go to the shops to go on a familiar journey, and you've got out of the car at the end of that journey and you've realized that you can't remember a thing about that journey. You were effectively unconscious at the wheel. Now, it's not just driving in which we do that. Research suggests that we spend about 80% of our waking hours in an unconscious state, just reacting to the various stimuli around us. without really giving anything any forethought or any planning. When we snap into the present moment and make a decision to do something, then we are consciously involved in that process. And that's why when we look at the method of doing this, the very first thing we need to do is make a conscious decision on what we're about to do on this task. So this is not like, one of those positive mental attitudes where I will focus on my goal and nothing will get in my way. It's not like that at all. This is having a vague destination and making the decision that when a distraction comes in or an interruption comes in, you can just let it go again. The difference is that you just don't get involved with those thoughts. So we're not trying to shut them out. And that's very different to the positive mental attitude where you shut all distractions out and you just focus on what you're doing. We're not doing that. We're allowing distractions to come up. So the phone's still tinging, the text messages are still coming, the radio station's still crap, and I still want to drink. But I can just see those for what they are. They are just distractions, they are just thoughts. And I can choose consciously whether or not I involve myself or not. So if I have a think about it, am I really thirsty? No, I'm okay actually. I can just carry on with this trench. I'll get to the end of my trench. That text message, do I really need to answer it now? No, don't need to. I'll just carry on with this. Do I really need to change the music? No, another song will come on soon enough. I'll just let that be. Rather than, music's crap, I'll have to go and change it. I'm thirsty, I'll grab a drink. And, what was he saying in that text message? So we're not drawn away unconsciously. We make the conscious choice to stay with what we're doing. So in effect, we're allowing these distractions to be there. We're not encouraging them, but we're not discouraging them either. So it becomes a state of contentment, being happy and okay with whatever pops up. Now this gives you tremendous freedom. Freedom to just get on with whatever you're doing. The distractions will keep coming. There's a never-ending stream of them, but you can just simply notice them, smile at their attempt to derail you, and just carry on. Just watch, notice, and allow and let go. Now, this isn't just a method for being more productive and being more focused, because if you think about it, all the input that I had on that survey right at the start of this program, where people were saying how disorganized they were and how they couldn't cope because they were stressed out and how they felt that they were going to have to give up teaching and how it was too much and they weren't enough. They are just distractions. Just like the thoughts about needing a drink or the thoughts about wanting to answer the text message or the thoughts about wanting to change the radio station, they're just thoughts. Now, if we entertain them, if we get involved with them, or if we worry about them, then they can derail us. But by using this method, we're able to just let these thoughts be there and just let them go. And they will go when we don't give them any energy, when we don't get involved in them, when we don't get drawn in, when we don't interact. And that is the process of mindfulness. That is the process of this Zen focus method. You just allow all those things to be and to pass. And the more you practice this, the better you get at it. And what you find is that as you carry on doing it, the distractions slow down, your mind settles. And soon, within about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I found that I was just humming along. My body was moving in smoother movements. I didn't need to exert myself as much, but I'm getting more done. My shovel was moving easier, steady rhythm. And I got to the point where I was really enjoying the task. Now, at that point, we slip into something called flow, if we're lucky enough. And flow is that state of work where, or a state of doing an activity where you do something just for the pleasure of the activity itself. We just get lost in it. And in that state, there's no stress because there's no time. There's nothing to worry about because none of that exists. All that exists is just doing that task. That's like a champion tennis player who's just practiced a forehand volley 6 billion times. And so when he plays it, it's just like poetry. It's the snooker player who's just completely lost in the game. It's the artist who's completely lost in a painting, the dancer who's completely lost in the music. That's when we get into a state of flow. Time doesn't exist anymore. We're just in this process. And you can get that with anything. It's just a case of practice. Now, as well as this recording, I'm going to put a couple of exercises for you to practice detaching from thoughts. One's a simple breathing exercise and one is just a very simple mindfulness activity. But in actual fact, anything at all can become a mindfulness activity. Anything you're doing, whether it's shoveling shillies, clearing weeds, writing reports, drinking tea, it doesn't matter what it is. If you do it with a focused attitude, make a decision that you're going to be doing that, a conscious decision, and then you just allow and watch and allow the thoughts and distractions to pass on, and that becomes a mindfulness activity. So how do we do this? Well, step one, I've covered and mentioned a few times, is that you bring your full attention to the task. So it's a conscious decision, right? Okay, right now I'm going to drink a cup of tea. Okay, that is my target for the next few seconds. My target is to drink the last dregs of this cold, tepid, disgusting looking cup of tea. And as I do that, I can deal with the distractions, and I'll deal with the important distractions in a moment. But for unimportant distractions like the thoughts and the radio station and all those other little pings and tings and buzzers and whistles that come on from your phone, we can just allow those to be there. Now, when you finish your task, it's really important that you give yourself a little bit of acknowledgement. You know, we spend our whole lives thrashing ourselves and beating ourselves to a pulp, just meeting any demand that's placed in front of us. Barely even a second thought to the fact that this body and this mind is carrying you so diligently and so purposefully through your life without any word of thanks or acknowledgement. And often we forget just how important our own health is and our own sanity is. And we're all at risk, in my opinion, in this really busy, information-laden world of heading for burnout. We're at risk of giving too much. I have an analogy of, well, Sally and I, my wife and I, have the analogy of an ambulance. You know, if you've got family who depend on you, or friends who depend on you, or anyone, whether it's in your work or your home life, that is dependent on you to be there, you can see yourself almost as the ambulance. But you can't help anyone else if your ambulance has got flat tires and a worn down battery and a broken windscreen and no fuel in the tank. You have to look after the vehicle first. You've got to look after the ambulance. So it almost sounds selfish, but you've got to put yourself first. And part of that is acknowledging when you've made some progress. Just take a step back and just take a rest. I was reading a book recently by a guy who's a coach to high-end sports stars. I forget what the name of the book is. I'll try and put it in the resources that accompany this. But he used to work just with sprinters and tennis players, so Olympic athletes and world-class sports people. And he said that what he coaches them to do is to recover between races and between shots that they've played so that they maintain or recover as much energy as possible. And although he doesn't help with their skill set at all, because they're all at the top of their game, the very small changes that he makes to them in terms of conserving energy is often enough to make them raise their game and get ahead of the competition. And what he says is, so to give you an example, a tennis player might play a volley at the net, and then whether they win or lose the shot, when they're walking back to the baseline, they are solely concentrating on recouping and conserving energy. So they wouldn't be walking back, beating themselves up and giving themselves a hard time for missing the shot. They wouldn't be going back walking if they'd won the shot thinking, yeah, I'm great, the crowd must love me. It's solely on, okay, energy back, energy back, energy back. And that makes a huge difference. Now, what he says is that if you look at most people's lives, they work flat out for, say, 40 years. The only break they get is during the holidays. They go abroad for a couple of weeks, but then even during the holidays, they're working hard, particularly teachers, serving their family or just doing planning and marketing and everything else. Very little time off until they retire. That's when we all rest. Whereas if you look at a sports star, an Olympic sprinter, you know, they work so hard on that track. everything for about 11 seconds, and then it's rest, recuperate, go for spa treatment, get the physio team in, make sure the energy levels are high for the next race. All out for that race, and then rest, recuperate, get the energy back. And then you have an off season where it's all about resting and getting the energy back and relaxing. And then you've got your on season. Now, if we were to live our lives a little bit more like that, where we have an on season and off season, and we conserve energy, and we consider our health and our sanity rather than just unconsciously trying to blaze through life, or not even trying, just doing it, that's what we do, then we've got a much better chance of A, increasing our energy, and B, making considered choices that can be more beneficial to us. So one of the things that you might consider, which I'm going to do now, and then I'll come back to this, is to change your morning routine. Again, I'm only sharing things with you that have made a huge difference to me, and this is one of them. I used to get up as late as I could. So if it was getting up to go to work, I would get up just in time to have breakfast and go to work. Or if I'm on holiday, it was just in time to get up with the kids or do what I had to do. Now I get up a good hour, if not 2 hours, before I need to be up. And in that hour or 2 hours is when I meditate, I do some yoga, I do some breathing. Sometimes I go for a walk or a run, or sometimes I get down and do some writing or some reading. It depends how I feel, but I find that in that silent time before everyone else is up, I can really give something back to myself, whatever I want, whether it's rest and recuperation, or whether it's a little bit of learning, or whether it's a bit of invigoration, going for a run or whatever. It's just my time. It's my time to do what I want. Now, some people start their day by writing. Some people find that they get their best work done, all their planning, all their writing aspects done from, say, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and get it all out of the way. You might find that you're that type of person. At 5 o'clock in the morning, you can just get all your planning and your marking done. And it's done. Just by getting up an hour earlier, you save yourself 7 hours a week. Straight away, you've gained 7 hours a week. Now, you might think, you are joking. I am absolutely shattered already. You think I'm going to get up an hour earlier? Go to bed an hour earlier. Watch an hour's less TV. Put in some of these other techniques to save hours through bulking, outsourcing, to-do lists, all these other things that we've talked about. Save yourself a few hours there. Go to bed a bit earlier and get up a bit earlier. I'll tell you now that even if you don't go to bed an hour earlier, you can get up an hour earlier and it really won't affect you. It really doesn't leave you feeling any more tired. I've done it a long time now. And the difference that can make to your life in terms of extra time for you, giving you time to do what you want in that time, whether it is you want to do some work or whether it is you just want to do something for you, it's amazing. So that's your power hour. And I zipped through these. So in terms of dealing with your distractions with the focus method, unimportant distractions, you just let them go. But now and again, something important will come up. Like you might get interrupted by a colleague, in which case you've got to say to them, look, I'm very busy right now. I can speak in 15 minutes. You've got to deal with that and take control of the situation. If it's really urgent, life or death, then obviously you've got to go. You make the decision. But if it's something that pops up into your head or a memo comes through or whatever, that is when you park it. And this is where the declutter machine comes into its own, because you've now got folders and holding pens for anything that is really important that you don't want to deal with right now. So right now, I'm digging my trench. Beep, beep, memo comes in. Oh, this pupil needs this pupil needs that. Okay, well, I'll put that into my class list folder. That's fine. I can deal with that afterwards. Or I'll write that on my update list. Once I finish my trench, deal with year 10 boy or whatever it is. So that's how you park important distractions and do them later. Finally, 4 magic words to keep you on task. You've already seen what they are, but I found these really, really help when you just find that your mind is just drifting all the time, or you're doing something that you really don't want to be doing. You want to get on and do something else. Right now, you're doing this one thing. And that's all you have to say to yourself. Right now, I'm digging a trench. Ping, ping, ping. Answer me, please. Answer me, please. Right now, I'm digging a trench. Horrible music on the radio. Right now, I'm digging the trench. Oh, I could do with a drink. Right now, I'm digging the trench. So those 4 words can really help in terms of keeping you focused. And that, my friends, is everything done. What I would appreciate is that you can send your feedback to me, rob@theliferaft.org, good and bad. My plan is with this program, this is a very new program that I'm really just starting to develop. And it's purely come about from that revelation of my father's house, the fact that I got more done in 2 hours than I had done in the previous 2 days, purely because of learning how to focus and deal with things. And then I thought, well, I have all these other strategies that I've been using in my life and have made such a big difference. This all needs to be shared because it's helping me. It can help others too. However, I want to know what works for you and what you feel is complete and utter hogwash, and you don't really see any benefits to that. Give me your feedback and let me know if you would like to be included in a book that I'm going to be putting together called Zen Productivity. What I'm looking for is little stories, little feedback case studies of you using some of these techniques and getting success with them. Let me have those with your details and I'll include it in the book. Anybody who gets any kind of feedback to me will get a free copy of the book, and you can help me actually publicize it when it comes about. I'll explain that later through the emails. But what I want to do now is thank you for taking part in this. Please implement what you've learned, any aspects of it. It might just be one little tip that you've picked up from this and you think, actually, that could make a big difference. Try it all. Give me any feedback that you've got. And yeah, there we go. Thank you very much.